Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan here with Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up?
Not much. How are you, buddy?
Today, I'm all good. Thanks for asking. Today is our weekly stream or skip episode. Our regular listeners know the rules. Pete, I know you've got them memorized. You want to recant them one more time for our folks?
No problem. So,
Okay.
Ethan has given me a list of shows he'd like me to watch. I have given him a list of shows I'd like him to watch. The idea is we randomly select a show every week. We watch at least 2 episodes of that show, and on that basis, determine if that show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
And how do you think we're doing year to date? I think you got off to a pretty hot start. You had a couple like must subscribes, and then you tailed off, I think, in the past few weeks, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting position. I started off very average. There was like a very good period of like a couple weeks in a row where they were must subscribes. Right. And now I'm kind of tailing off again back into the average to maybe less than average.
Uh-oh. So let's dive into it. What were you assigned this week, and has it gotten you back on track?
It has not, unfortunately. I watched Transatlantic.
And we weren't sure what this was about last week when it was assigned to you.
That's exactly
we thought
right.
Like Titanic or
so
what is
it's quite a literal take. The show is set in early 1940s, late 1930s France. So World War II has started, but this is before the US has officially entered the war.
Okay.
The Nazis have basically taken over or have invaded France. And the US is trying to maintain a diplomatic presence there with all parties. You know, they're just trying to be politically neutral. The show is about an organization called Emergency Rescue Committee. This is a true story, by the way.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And the Emergency Rescue Committee was this organization that was founded and specifically created to smuggle and evacuate persecuted Jewish artists and intellectuals from France, or at least from the Iberian Peninsula and France, to the United States. And this was obviously very difficult because of 2 things. One, there was a souring take on the rise of immigration in the US at the time. So there was like a Keep America, America kind of movement going on in the general public. Simultaneously, in terms of diplomatic relationships, the US was cracking down on the number of visas it was issuing. The diplomat that we see in France is actually played by Corey Stoll, who most people will remember from House of Cards,
Billions,
and Ant-Man, and Billions. That's right. And the other lead that I recognize is Jillian Jacobs. Jillian Jacobs is Britta Perry on Community. That's where I think most people will know her from. She's also done a few other things, but that's where I know her from, for example. And her role is that she's the heiress to this massive fortune, and she's using her father's money to basically fund the Emergency Rescue Committee. Okay. So the show is, it takes a look at this interplay.
So it's serious. This is serious subject matter.
This is serious subject matter. This is, so think of this as kind of like a biopic, but not quite, but still based on true story. And that's obviously where the name Transatlantic comes from. It's because they're trying to smuggle these people from Europe across the Atlantic to the US. Look, the show looks very good. Everyone is era appropriate. Personally speaking, I love the style of the classic French look from that era. Of course, minus the Nazi effect, obviously. The show is based in Marseille. There's a bit of a seaside feel to the town. It's quite cool like that. But you really have to be a fan of European history, and more specifically Western European history in the early 20th century, for this to be appealing to you. I can understand the appeal for others, but the premise itself, while I commend it, it's not for me.
Too serious?
I don't mind seriousness, but just in terms of the topic matter, it didn't do anything. It's a mini series. It's only one season long. That's it. It's one and done, 7 episodes. It's not long, but like for context, I downloaded this on my iPad to watch on my flights. I finished the first episode. I really didn't want to watch the second episode.
Yikes.
And this was a 3-hour flight. And I was like, I would rather just sit and stare into space than watch the second episode.
That's the worst thing that like a showrunner could hear about a show, right? Like,
yeah. And
do
again,
nothing.
we have to watch these at least 2 episodes because that's the rules we set for ourselves. So I watched the second episode and I downloaded the entire 7-episode series. And as soon as the credits hit for the second episode, I deleted all 7 episodes from my iPad.
I think that is the score right there, right?
Yeah.
That is the rating.
Yeah.
If you don't even want to go into the second episode, and if immediately after it's done you delete all the other episodes, I think that's your answer right there.
Yeah. So this is definitely a skip from me. I again caveat that by saying this is not for me. That's not saying this is a bad show. The premise, it's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Everything else, very good. I cannot fault the show for it, but ultimately, it doesn't matter if the show looks like $1 million or not. I'm not enjoying myself. And the fact that I was rather sit bored on a flight for an hour more than watch this show says everything about it. So
if you want to talk to the person sitting next to you on a flight rather than watch this show, it's a bad sign.
Bad sign. Exactly. So this is a skip for me.
Where is it showing? It's Hulu, Netflix?
Netflix. This is on Netflix.
Another Netflix downer. That's really disappointing.
It is another Netflix downer, but kudos to Netflix. This is, I recognize that this is probably a good show. It's just not for me. That's it. So I don't think that's the general consensus. I don't think that it's a bad show with a good premise. That's just a bad show. I think that's worse. I think that's more of a damning indictment.
Oh, yeah.
If it's a good premise, but it's bad for me personally, that's fine because that's just my personal opinion. But, we've seen so many other shows on Netflix, on Amazon, where the premise is good, but the execution is bad. Cough, cough, Citadel, cough, cough.
Huh.
That's when you start talking about shows that are fundamentally bad.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
All right. What about you?
That's Transatlantic on Netflix, assigned to Pete, who gives it a skip rating. But we do the hard work so you don't have to. Speaking of hard work, I was also assigned a Netflix show. It is called Sweet Tooth. And apparently it started in 2021 and it's apparently now 3 seasons long. Let me summarize it quickly as this. It is very similar to The Last of Us. Almost down to every single theme is very similar. It involves a kid traveling to find someone or something. It involves a big, gruff dude who basically takes this kid underneath his arm, and despite his initial reaction, comes to like the kid very much. It involves the end of the world and the ugly outcome from that. So it's very, very similar to The Last of Us. And it made me think that there was some inspiration drawn from that, but apparently not. So Netflix describes this as a boy who is half human and half deer survives in a post-apocalyptic world with other hybrids.
Deer?
Deer, like the animal.
Okay.
At the very beginning, remember the Umbrella Academy? How it
started?
Where
you meet all the kids are getting born.
Yes. It starts very much like this. And it shows all these kids being born, and they have like antlers or horns or a tail or fur or more than one of these. And then there's like a narrator who says something like, this is an exact quote, but it's more or less like this. We don't know what came first, the hybrids or the virus. But blah, 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 the whole world, started getting this illness, and there were no more like baby humans born, only, hybrids. And then it just shows, very similar to The Last of Us, this apocalypse of kind of like this very hardcore quarantine and people not going outside, and then them getting sick and kind of like coughing up blood and dying. At the same time, it shows like all these other kids were born as kind of like half animals, but they're not all the same kind of animals. Some of them look like half pig. Some of them look half deer. Some of them are like half dog or half wolf or half elephant. It doesn't make any sense. Then, of course, the humans, in addition to almost entirely dying off and being extinct, were fearful or prejudiced against these hybrids, right? Half kid, half animal, and tried to kill almost all of them. Some of them survived. So our main character, his name is Gus. He's half deer. His dad, when he was a baby, his mom died. And his dad basically took him to like the middle of Montana and like raised him in a house until like the dad passed away. And then the kid, who was like kind of like a young teenager, was forced to kind of like be on his own. Then he meets this other dude who's basically like I don't want to call him like a poacher, kind of like bounty hunter. Very similar to the dude in Pedro Pascal in The Last of Us,
Yeah.
just kind of the scavenger, does whatever he needs to do to stay alive and make money. Meets the kid, takes him under his arm and says, okay, like I'll protect you and I'll take you on this journey to try to find a safe place for you, whatever. I watched 3 episodes, and again, it's different than The Last of Us, but the themes are exactly the same. So if you like The Last of Us, you were comfortable at the end of the world and the graphicness of how people reacted to being quarantined or coming down with a disease, very, very similar to that. You remember how that went in the first few episodes? It was pretty violent and pretty graphic.
Yeah.
Very similar to that. If you like the idea of the dude is Nosno Anozi. I remember him from Game of Thrones, where he was like the richest man in the kingdom. He's also been in a bunch of other stuff, but he's physically huge.
Okay.
So if you like the idea of like the big, physically man, a few words, violent, imposing type, taking a young, innocent, a little bit mischievous kid under his shoulder and kind of working with them through all the different challenges, you'll like this show a lot. It's very, very similar in that way to The Last of Us. For me, I give it a middle of the score. It's a mooch, definitely not a must subscribe. The element of the half child, half animal is a little bit weird, even weirder than like the zombie. The zombies in The Last of Us are explained a little bit with like the bacteria, right? There's, at least I'm aware of, there's no real explanation here. Maybe we'll get to that because it's 3 seasons, but there's no explanation here. And that whole element, I think, is just kind of like too weird for me to get my head around. The relationship between Nosno and the kid Gus is actually very, very good. It equals Ellie and Pedro Pascal. It's a very, very decent, genuine relationship. Like the guy starts off very gruff and aggressive, and after time he really actually likes and takes care of the kid. The kid's nickname is Sweet Tooth because apparently he loves things that are like as a kid he loved maple syrup, and now when he tried candy for the first time, he loves candy or caramel or anything sweet, so his nickname is Sweet Tooth. That's where the name of the show comes from.
And I know you mentioned this, but you're sure there's no connection to The Last of Us, the video game?
None.
Because this came out 3 years before The Last of Us, the TV series, came out.
Yeah.
Premise-wise, right now, it sounds almost identical.
It's very, very similar. And even I've read online a few articles asking, like, is one inspired by the other? Is there a spinoff? And apparently there's There's no like official connection. But I agree, the premise, the entire thing is very, very similar. Although it's not like totally novel, right? I mean, there's lots of stories where the gruff older guy takes the young kid under their wing. I think it's because I've seen these in such close proximity to each other
Right.
that the storyline is very, very similar. To be honest, I don't have a whole lot more to say about it, primarily because we went through The Last of Us in such excruciating detail. We both love that show. Sweet Tooth, again, if it were set up without this fantasy element of the hybrid, the half child, half animal, I think I'd probably be a little bit more inclined to continue watching it. But to be honest, I'm a little bit, like the guy's ears are very sensitive. His antlers are kind of getting in the way sometimes. He has to hide them sometimes. It's just not really like doing it for me. I stopped watching it after 2 episodes. Totally serviceable show. If you love The Last of Us, to be honest, you'll probably really like this show. If that's not your thing, you should probably skip it, but it's well done. It made it to 3 seasons. And whenever something makes it to 3 seasons, you have to wonder like how it's developed. Because watching the first 2 episodes of a show is dramatically different than when the show finds its footing, at the end of season 1, season 2, right? I mean, it's dramatically different. So in that sense, I have to admit, I have a little bit of curiosity in terms of how this evolves. But overall, after 2 episodes, it was just kind of like ho hum. I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't gaining any new creativity. There weren't any great action sequences. It was very down the middle in terms of how you would expect it to be given the storyline.
Right.
So for me, it's a mooch. And again, I think the best recommendation I can give is that if you like The Last of Us, you will probably like this. If you did not like The Last of Us or didn't watch The Last of Us, either you should first watch The Last of Us or you should skip this entirely. And I think that's the easiest way to, to explain this.
Okay.
So that is Sweet Tooth on Netflix. 3 seasons though, and it's rated pretty highly on IMDb. So if you think that's your ball of wax, you may want to check it out.
Well, perfect.
And that's Streamer Skip for this week.
That is Streamer Skip for this week. Shall we talk about what's up for next week?
Yes, because I know what I've been assigned and I'm eagerly anticipating it.
Awesome. So you are going to be on Amazon Prime and you will be watching Dead Ringers.
Dead Ringers on Amazon Prime with Rachel Weisz.
Rachel Weisz, that's right. I don't know anything about the show. I just know that she plays twins.
Identical twins.
That's right. And that it's based on, I'm pretty sure it's a movie. I think it's a remake.
Very similar to the time, wasn't it Tom Hardy who played like identical twin brothers in like a mobster movie?
He did,
once?
yeah, in Legend, Cray Brothers. Also a true story, by the way.
You have to give the actor a lot of credit, and to be honest, the entire production team when they play something like this, because you basically have to play 2 different characters and have it in your mind, the 2 different characters. You have to have a lot of patience because you're basically filming every scene
Twice.
The patience you have, first of all, to film one scene, like if you're sitting in a diner, it's got to be excruciating to do the same lines over and over and over again, right? Now imagine when you're done with that, you go sit on the opposite side of the table and you have the exact same dialogue, but the other part, the patience has got to be extraordinary.
And technically, it's got to be so difficult because, for example, in Legend, they filmed fight sequences where the 2 of them were in the fight sequence, which means that if they're filming that twice, they have to get the fight sequence perfectly the same both times. And he has to play 2 different roles in that fight sequence.
Right.
I mean, that's honestly, I don't know how the technical stuff is done that way, but just on paper, cannot be easy.
I don't think they get double the pay though.
Which is a shame.
It's a good way to save cost.
I guess.
Maybe Fast and Furious should have tried that.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got Dead Ringers on Amazon Prime. What do you have for next week?
I've got The Patience of Dr. Garcia on Netflix.
Oh, I have no idea what that's about. I assigned it to you, though.
Never heard of it.
Good luck watching that.
Looking forward to it. In the meantime, listeners, if you have a TV series or a movie that you'd like us to review and watch because you don't want to do it, that's okay because we do the hard work so you don't have to.
Outsource it to us.
Aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com or tweet at us at FNS Podcast or DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. But the easiest thing you could do is like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and leave us a comment. Any one of those 4 action points would really help us out.
You know, what Pete has said earlier is something that can be really valuable. If you have a flight, let's say, for example, a transatlantic flight,
Heyo.
and you want to download a series and you're really not sure what to watch, of course, listen to Films and Stuff. We've got great recommendations on what's popular now, which is Mandalorian and all the other stuff that we've loved. But if you've kind of gone through all of that and you need something else new, that's what the Stream and Skip segment is for, to review some of the lesser known things. We find some diamonds in the rough, like Beef on Netflix. We find some things that are pretty rubbish, not to name names. But if you're looking for something new and you've got 4 or 5 suggestions, we'd be happy to flip through all of them and give you our ratings, our recommendations, or the order that we think that you should prioritize these in.
That's exactly right. Because the last thing you want on a flight, whether it's intercontinental or whatever, is to sit there with nothing to watch because you downloaded a show that you thought was going to be great and it turned out to be absolute garbage.
Literally the worst.
We've all been there.
That's Films and Stuff Podcast. We will catch you guys next week for more stream or skip recommendations.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Pete. We'll see you all soon. Thanks, listeners. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.